So usually I keep my guests to the 40, 50, or 60 range so that they can uh, share their experience, strength, and hope from that real solid middle-aged place. But my next guest, Paul Maskill, just impressed me with his wisdom early in life. He is 35. He does have a kid, and he does have the challenges that we all have. But in our conversations, and I've been on his podcast, he really is committed to the small business owner, to the entrepreneur, not only systems and the plumbing and the pipes and profit and loss, but also in quality of life and how you do this. He's the founder of the Ultimate Freedom Mastermind. He built his own business to over $500,000 and sold it for, like, I think, a 4x return. He's on a mission to help entrepreneurs grow their business, but not die with their business. I think it became from just watching his father own his own service-based business for over 40 years. And when it was time to exit with no employees and no systems and no capitalization, he just sold it for the equipment and the trucks and, kind of the brick and mortar. And I think that is what fuels Paul, but we'll find out more. So today he helps small business owners automate their businesses so they can thrive without them. And we love people who are able to thrive. He enables them to leverage their business to build the life they love. So that's where he and I intersect. Paul, thanks for being on the show.
Mark, thanks so much for having me. Really excited for the interview.
Yeah, I'm so cautious with people. I get approached by people who are business coaches, and there's enough podcasts to do that. That's your lane. Like, you bring your expertise, you bring other people with that same expertise. And for me, like I said, I want to hug these people. Like, I want to give them the wherewithal and the resiliency to actually put all of your systems into place. Because I think if you're running and gunning and miserable, it's really hard to think about all the brilliance that you have to bring.
Yeah, and I commend you for doing that. And as you mentioned in the intro, I'm getting to that point where I just want to hug people because there's so much more to life than just the business that's running them.
It's craziness, man. Once you get a certain amount of success, and again, mastering midlife for me is when the drives and motivations that got us to a certain point, and you figured it out like in your 20s, when get you to a certain place, then you start to realize that there are real things in life: relationship, art, creating things, connection, legacy, all those things that are so much more important, which is why we built our business in the first place.
Yeah, and I think we forget that so quickly. I know most people who start their business left a job. So their only goal is, I just don't want to have a boss anymore. And that was me at first. It was like, and I had all the time in the world. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids, didn't have a mortgage. So it was like, yeah, this is great. I love it. I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week. It's less than I was working. It's more than I was working before, but it's stuff that I love to do. So I was like, this is great, until I realized, like, why am I doing this anyway? And I didn't really know why, because I had achieved my goal of not having a boss. And then I started to realize there's got to be more to this than than what I'm doing now, because this isn't sustainable. And for me, the final question was, what happens if I got hit by a bus? Like, yeah, I got a business that was making money, but then it's going to come to a screeching halt. My wife now, at the time, we got married during owning this first business. She would have been hung out to dry. Nobody knew how to run my business. And then my customers, employees, and everybody else would have been like, what happened? I thought this thing was such a successful business, but it really wasn't. It was just a job that I created for myself.
Yeah, no, so I'm living proof of it. I left the corporate world, started my coaching business because everybody thought it was a great idea that I'm a natural coach and this is what I should be doing. And I really love, I live for this. I live for the coaching. I live for making a difference in other people's lives. I didn't realize I was going to be an entrepreneur. I didn't realize that now I pay my own American Express. I have to get my own health insurance, all that stuff. So that was a rude awakening for me. And if I get hit by a bus, this business is done because it's all me. I have some online programs and stuff, but I have not built a sustainable business that runs without me, income that runs without me yet.
Yeah. And and obviously you say yet, because we all start there somewhere, right? Unless you're going to get funding from somebody, and 99% of small business owners don't. It's like, hey, I have to do everything at first. The key is, do you have a plan to eventually not do everything so you can leverage that business, like you said, to build a life that you love, so you can spend more time with family and friends? as we get older, our parents get older, our friends get older. We have less and less time. We only have one shot at this. And I know for a fact we're going to regret things that we don't do way more than things that we do. It's like, man, I really wish I wouldn't have done. It's like, no, like, it's okay. You can take a week off. Your business will still be there. It's not life and death. It's not blood and guts. You're not like, a first responder. It's going to be okay. And you will be very grateful that you spent that time with whoever it was, because when it's all said and done and you're at your funeral, it's not about how much money was in the bank. Yes, you needed money to do certain things. It's not about your resume. It's about all the relationships, the impact, the legacy that you leave, for all the next generations and all the relationships you built over time.
Yeah, I was watching Howard Stern was being interviewed by David Letterman, and he talked about the cost of being maniacally focused on becoming the king of all media, the cost to his family, the cost to his health, the cost to himself. And we only find that stuff out in hindsight as we watch people building these things. And maybe he would have done it still, but the regret that he lives with, he still has his multi hundreds of millions of dollars and his stature, but he talked about the cost. And somehow, could he have become king of all media or successful and impactful and still had some semblance of a life that he didn't regret?
Yeah. And really, at the end of the day, what is king of all media, right? That's still like, it's a race you're never going to stop. So would it be okay to like be the not king of media, but be the king of all, like everybody you hang out with, and just have that and maybe make a little bit less, but have a lifestyle that is, a lot more conducive to building those relationships and
But you
having
can't
fun?
tell that to someone who's in their 20s or 30s who thinks that that's the only thing that's going to make them matter.
You can't. And then they come up with these numbers. And I was like, at first I was like, I just want to get out of the corporate world. But then once I started to have success, it's like, oh, I want the 6 figures. I want the 7 figures. And then it's like, that's great, but really at what expense? Or maybe it's not an expense and you've been able to scale something and you can make that money while using it to impact more people instead of just feeding your ego, which, as you know, 20s and 30s, it's all about the ego and it's all about keeping up with the Joneses. And then you realize the Joneses didn't give a shit anyway.
Yeah. And for people who don't realize it in their 40s and 50s, it's still about the ego. And that's when the illness and the challenges happen. So speaking of challenges, please go listen to Paul's his own podcast to talk about the systems that he builds and how he can make you streamline your business. Guy is freaking brilliant. But one of the topics that you often talk about is the worst case scenarios. When they happen, are never as bad as we think it will be. And I was telling you before we turned on the mics that I had a client who who texted me at 4:00 in the morning saying we can't work together because his business completely imploded, and he has no money to pay me, and we're stuck. And I got him on the phone and I said, look, don't worry about the money. I'm in this with you, right? Like and the question I posed to him is, how do we make this the best thing that ever happened to you? So you're on stage a year from now talking to entrepreneurs saying, I thought this was the end of the world, but actually it was the beginning of a new world. And you were able to this is one of your babies.
Yeah. And it's so true, because we play it out in our mind that whatever is going to happen, it's like the worst thing to ever happen. So, for me, it started when I was in the corporate world. I joined the finance industry in 2007. And then I watched everybody basically lose their job on my floor in 2008. So I was thinking, this doesn't really make sense to me to be doing this whole thing anyway, because all those people, they were so committed to this bank, this industry. And then all of a sudden, just like that, it's gone. So for me, the worst case scenario, fast forward a couple years out of the recession, I can quit my job. I can start a business. And if it doesn't work, I rather have, at least when it's all said and done, however old I am, whether it's 50, 60, 70, or 100, whenever I die, I would at least wanted to say, at least I tried that. And then when I realized, what's the worst case scenario if I go start my own business, it doesn't work, it crashes and burns. That's really the worst case scenario. I just have to go get another job. And going to get another job is not the end of the world, because it's just a temporary thing. Like you said, an opportunity really to figure out what didn't work to then go make it even better. And I was telling you before the show, I've done this many times. Even when it was my baby, I was working 80 hours a week with my business. I didn't want to give up control until I realized, well, what's the worst case scenario if I try this? I give everything to Mark. Mark, you can take all my work. and Mark, you just go crash and burn again. Well, it's just going to come back to me. So then it's like, well, it's already with me anyway, so I might as well at least try it. So that's a whole nother scenario of like, man, Mark's going to ruin it. The customers are going to hate us, all this other stuff. But that's not really the case, because 99.9% of the people in this world are good people. They're not going to just go do things maliciously bad. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 7 billion people on this planet. So, it's recurred in my life over and over. And I was just telling you before, I had a dog walking pet sitting business 6 months ago. My key employee, he was running everything, running the show, doing everything. He was going to eventually buy the business, and he just randomly sent me his 2-week notice. Said, hey, my family's ill. My wife's grandma's not doing well. We got to move back home to Virginia. I'm in North Carolina. So he said, unfortunately, this is my 2-week notice. And I was like, oh my God, like, I don't have time to take this business back. I got my other things going on. I was thinking, do I just shut it down? What do I do? And then that was my initial reaction. Take the emotion out of it. Fast forward 12, 24, 48 hours. And I'm like, okay, let's turn this into an opportunity. Let's take this business back from him, more or less. Let's go grow it. And then we'll find either somebody to run it or somebody to sell it. And ironically, literally like 1 month later, when I took a 2-week vacation to Europe, the guy I had running it while I was gone, when I came back, he said, Paul, I had so much fun. I want to buy your business. And he bought it for more than I was going to sell to the other guy. So turning that in from, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing ever, to how can we look at this and learn from this and make it even better? Whether it's personal or professional, it happens to us every day. And a lot of times we don't know why things happen. And then like 2 weeks later, it's like, aha, I got it. But being able to not make those judgments on emotion or what other people might think is so critical, yet so hard to do.
I had a gentleman named Mark Barden on the show a couple months ago. He wrote a book called A Beautiful Constraint. And the whole premise of A Beautiful Constraint is what happens when tragedy happens. The Apollo mission out to the moon, when they couldn't get things back, and they get everybody in a room and say, okay, we got these items. How do we get these men back from the moon? Right? Or Southwest Airlines, they win 4 routes. They only have 3 planes. How do we make this work? And they talk about the stages you need to go through in order to go from the emotional thing that you just talked about when the thing first hit, to that intelligent, to what can happen if. So let's go back to when your guy gave you the 2 weeks notice. You skipped right over that. 24, 48 hours later, I started thinking about what could happen, and I took the emotion out. What happened when you got the email?
Yeah, when I got the email, so I was sitting at another business that I'm a partner in, and it was just like a normal Monday or whatever. And I get this email from the employee, and it says 2-week notice. I'm like, what? Like literally, I just talked to you like last week, and you're like loving it, doing all these things. And I was like, wow. Okay, I don't even know what to do. Like, he was literally running everything, and I was just the owner. And I had a couple other obligations at the time, and then turned it into that opportunity where I could remove one of my obligations. So I was fairly vested into coaching a business. So I was going into their office once a week and helping them build a lot of systems and processes. And I made the transition. I didn't leave them high and dry, but this is my thought process: is I'll get them. This will allow me to speed up their process so I can get them to where they don't need me anyway, while also, throughout that next month of just kind of juggling things a little bit with the vision of, okay, then I can take this business back. Now I, quote unquote, own it again. I can make more money. And since I had already set the business up to be all systematized and automated, I was actually ended up working less and making more with a business, obviously owning that business, where I could then continue to increase the value. But yeah, at first when I got that email, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I called my wife later that day and I was like, Jack quit. And she's like, what? She's like, didn't you have dinner with him last week? I was like, yeah, he quit, like just like that. And his wife had a business here. Like, it was totally unexpected. They were totally committed to the area until they weren't. And I think the bigger lesson learned from that was, we all have aging parents. We have aging friends who things come up randomly. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, what do I do? And I was just talking on a podcast yesterday about this. My family's in Michigan. I'm in North Carolina. My parents are getting older. And being able to, if my mom called me today and say, oh my gosh, we're really sick, you need to come up here, we'd figure it out, because human beings always figured out. That's why we're still here millions of years later, because we always figured out when we have to. The problem is, a lot of times we don't do that until we have to figure it out. So being able to do that ahead of the game, instead of reacting when all of a sudden your world's a mess, makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, when I was writing the book Only Tens, I was so pleased with myself. I had gotten my system so perfect. I had beaten my ADD. I was getting shit done left and right, and I was headed to California to talk about my system. I was going to be on stage in front of hundreds of people to talk about Only Tens, and I'm like, I got this. And then I moved my mother to town into assisted living, and everything went to shit. Like I couldn't get anything done. I couldn't think. It was my mother was miserable. I was miserable. It was terrible. And I'm like, I have to get on a plane and go talk about how amazing my system is, and I can't get anything done. What do I do? And that actually put a chapter in the book called "And Then Your Mother Comes to Town," which made it better because what I realized was the 10 was no longer even my business. For the first 2 weeks that she was in town, the 10 was my mother. The 10 was being a good son. And what I learned in hindsight was to surrender to whatever comes up and make it part of, instead of, like, don't mess the boat. It made the talk better. It made the book better. Right. And it was really fascinating. So tell me, how do we look at the worst case scenario and how do we make it better?
Yeah. So I think, really, I think it goes back to our personal vision and our personal why. Why are we doing what we're doing anyway? And nobody starts a business to say, or nobody gets into a career to say, man, I can't wait to work 24/7, 365, have this cell phone attached to me wherever I go. Whatever we choose to do, it's usually to better our personal life, better our family life, better our relationships. Yet we always put those things on the back burner. So being really clear of having that filter of when that worst, when this kind of crossroads comes up, what is the worst case scenario? Is that actually going to happen? Probably not. And it's really, when you think of what could happen, it's really not that bad. Anyway, if you already have that vision and you're kind of really planning for it. So, when I quit my job, I just didn't go turn in my notice and say I'm done. We planned for those things, but instead of saying someday I'll do that, make that someday today and start putting those plans in place. So that way, when the worst case scenario happens, it's like, well, one, it's never going to happen because you planned for it. But two, having all of those, systems and balances and checks and balances and all that kind of in place. So that way, okay, when this does happen, you know, how can I kind of remove the emotion out of it and say, how can I use this to get me closer to where I want to go? So whether it's, you lose your job, your client just lost all of his business. How can we use that as an opportunity to say, let's figure this out. Let's take the emotion out of it. And let's make sure we get closer and closer to my goal. So, whether your goal is to be able to spend more time with your aging parents or to be able to travel to California, or for me, my family's in Michigan, my wife's family's in Florida. We want to be able to spend more time with them because they're not moving here. So being able to look at every scenario of like, well, what is the worst case scenario? And how likely is it going to happen? What can I do to make sure it doesn't happen? And have the patience to maybe put a couple, barriers in place or systems in place. So that way it's really not going to happen regardless of what you do or don't do.
Do you have a real world example besides the pet sitting business that we just talked about?
Yeah. So I would say, I actually have a client. It's a crazy story. So they're probably in their 40s. They have kids, and it's a husband-wife team. So the husband, it's a power washing business. So the husband goes out and does all the work, super picky, doesn't want anyone else to do it. And then the wife is the one running the office. She's kind of my client. She wants to make this business so it can thrive without them, so they can spend more time with their family. They can pass this legacy on to their kids. Say, hey, we've built this for you. It's a income generating asset, and we want to leave you better off than when we got here, basically. So I said, that's great, but you're still out there climbing ladders, power washing basically 40, 50, 60 hours a week. So nobody can do it as well as I can. I said, look, it's power washing. Whatever you do is better than the customer's expectations because they don't know how to do it at all. And we were talking on a Friday. We went out to lunch, and he said, I'm going to go ride my four-wheeler this weekend. I like going off, in the country, just get away from business, not talk about business, and just go ride my four-wheeler. I said, well, what happens if you get in a wreck and you break your leg? You said you want to support your family, yet you're
There's the
actually,
vision. There's the vision part. You want to
yeah,
support, so supporting your family and having a business that thrives is the 10, and power washing perfectly now is the 9.
Exactly. So I said, well, you really care about your three kids and you want to make sure you can provide for them. But what happens if you break your leg this weekend? Who's going to provide them? Because you can't get on a
Mm.
ladder with a broken leg. And he said, yeah, you're right. So we left lunch. She's part of my mastermind. So we got on the call Wednesday. I said, oh, hey, Kristen, how's everything going? She's like, you wouldn't believe it. You like spoke this into the universe.
Oh God, no.
And Ty didn't break his leg, but he got hit by somebody else and like totally mangled his foot. And he's out of commission. So I said, well, let's turn this worst case scenario into something that's really not that bad. This is actually a really great opportunity. It sucks that it happened. I kind of knew it was going to happen eventually because it happened to my father, as you mentioned, but let's turn this into a really good opportunity. So he had two helpers. I said, empower them, let them go, you know, and they're going to do fine because they're good people. Like they're not going to screw up on purpose. And if they do 80% as good as your husband, that's amazing because the customers are going to be blown away because you are still running the same type of business. You're still doing the customer service and all this stuff. And that was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. She's like, this was the best thing ever that happened, even though it sucked because now, you know, my husband doesn't have to be out there. These two guys are thriving. They're crushing it. We're getting 10 out of 10s on Google and five stars or whatever.
And you've just employed two more people in society.
Yeah. And you just turned two part-time workers into two full-time leaders who stepped up in the midst of a crisis. And now you're getting closer to where you want to go and leaving that legacy and building a business that can thrive without you. So to them, the worst case scenario is money's going to stop. But our human nature is we always figure it out. So the key, it's not easy, but to be able to put those things in place before they happen. So, you know, but that's another real life example. Legit just happened within the last month.
That was fascinating. So what are the steps? Tell what if you were really going to put this down and you're writing a book on this particular subject, what are the steps?
Yeah. So I think first is coming up with that personal vision and personal mission and personal why. A lot of times we don't. So like me originally, it was just, I don't want to have a boss. But then I was just keeping this ship afloat, running in the hamster. I was like, well, this really isn't, I mean, this is fine, but it's really risky. Like I might as well go get a job where I have a 401k and benefits and, you know, disability and all that. So when we have a clear personal vision, it allows us to then build a future organization to support that. So that's like my mission now is let's build a business so that it can support the life that you really love, the life that you want, spending more time with kids, parents, family, friends, playing golf, taking care of yourself, reading books. A lot of times we get caught in the trap of whether we're professionals or we're business owners, we feel guilty when we're not doing something. Like it's okay to go meditate for 30 minutes. It's okay to read a book in the middle of the day. Like that's okay. So once you have that personal vision and you know what kind of business you need to build from a financial standpoint and from a manpower standpoint, then you really, you know, those are kind of the first two steps. Then you just need to set aside time to get you closer to that goal. So, you know, in the example I just gave you, they never set aside time until they had to. It's like, oh, well, he's got a mangled foot. Now he can teach these people. So do that before it becomes a big
Right.
crisis. And then really just doing it. So, you know, doing it in the sense of if you're owning a business, how do you create how do you just document everything that you do so that there is a manual of if something happens to Mark, this is how Mark did his job, and we can kind of keep it going and, you know, figure it out. So documenting those systems and processes, it's super easy with technology. I'm not gonna get all into it, but we're on Zoom. You can record a screen on Zoom and it's free. And we all have like a ridiculously powerful video camera here.
Isn't
So
it? Right.
like in his case, he could just have his assistants videotaping him with their phone of this is how you clean a gutter. This is how you power wash a driveway, whatever it is, you know, and then really just doing that over and over and over. And eventually you've built a business that can thrive without you. And you can really do all those fun things that you want to do in midlife, because once you're there, it's like the clock's ticking and you're going to regret not doing, like, man, because whenever we do these things, 100% of the time we always say, man, I wish I would have done that sooner. We never say, I wish I would have never done that. Like, because we always figure it out. Your client's example, my client's example, we always figure it out. And that's the beauty of being a human, is we know how to survive.
You know, it's interesting. It's 3 weeks later, and my client, after, you know, like we talked almost every single freaking day, like even if it was for 5 minutes, just to keep him on track, to keep his spirits in the right way, keep him creating, keep him. And 3 weeks later, he now has an investor that takes the place of the thing that crushed his business. right? His business is going to be healthier because of it. And when we looked at his business projections, and I thought we were going to lower those projections, he's actually, no, we're actually going to raise a couple of them. And I was kind of blown away because I knew to say that, but when it actually comes to fruition, it's like, wow, that really worked. He is in a better place with this emergency happening, right? Than he was. So it's really kind of cool. So this also illustrates for me why a guy like you, having a business coach seems like an expense, and you're worth your weight in gold, because you're steeped like a tea bag in the water of your business. You need someone to come and go, look, here's some scenarios that could happen. Let's prepare for those. Here's some systems we can put into place. You're too busy running your business to even think about that. Let me help you get these systems together. And next thing you know, a business coach like yourself pays for itself over and over and over and over again. So it's really, you illustrated that very convincingly to me.
Yeah. And I think, you know, no matter what you're doing in life, having a mentor, having a guide, having a coach who's done what you want to do and is at a place where you want to be, it's so important. And for so long, we have the ego of, I can do it by myself. I can figure it out. I'm a hard charging, you know, this is stuff, I got it. But eventually you realize there is no trophy for trying to figure it out all on your own. And you might as well go learn from people who have done it, people who have a plan, and then surrounding yourself with that accountability. Because if your client didn't have you, they'd have been like, whatever, I'm done. Maybe I'll file bankruptcy or whatever the case is. And this just isn't for me. But when you have that person in your corner and they have a blueprint of, you know, this is how we're going to do it. And then you have that accountability of like, okay, go do it. We'll check in tomorrow. Whether that accountability is your coach, an accountability partner, or like a mastermind. I always equate it to, you know, health in this country. In the US, 65% of Americans are overweight. It's not because lack of knowledge. Everybody that's overweight knows what they need to do or knows what they shouldn't have done to get to that point. It's not like we went to Google and say, how do we lose weight? And there's nothing there. Like, we got that. But why are 65% of people overweight? Because they don't have somebody guiding them. They don't have a coach. They don't have a mentor. They don't actually have a plan to lose weight. They'll just say, oh, it's January 1st, I'm gonna lose weight. Well, how are you gonna do that?
And they also don't have a vision. They don't have a vision of why.
Right. Yeah. And it's, you know, well, why do you want to do that? And then they don't have accountability. So I started going to a kickboxing gym, and I got a guy he's done this a lot longer than me. He's my guide. He's got a plan. When you walk in, he's like, this is what we're doing today. And then the accountability is the other people that show up at the same time. I go at 5 a.m. It's like, if I'm not there, I'm going to hear it from these people for like the next week. So I need to be there. And what he does is he'll always say, when you coming back? So I was there this morning. He says, when you coming back? I said, I'll be there tomorrow. He's like, all right, see you first thing tomorrow morning. Just having that in place, we don't need any more information. We need that transformation. We can get information at the tip of our fingers. We got a phone, we got Google. But when you have those people in your corner, it makes it so much more powerful, so much more fun too, because you can go on this journey with other people.
Which is why you run the Ultimate Freedom Mastermind.
Yeah, 100%. So it's just so powerful when you can get people in that group of different life experiences, different industries really too. It's like, hey, this works in my industry. It's probably kind of weird in yours, but you might want to try it. And then the accountability of when Mark tells the group of 9 people, this is what I'm going to do next week. It's our job to cheer him on, make sure he gets through it, make sure he busts through it. And 9 people probably have different ideas to break through that barrier. So it's like, hey, you're going to run into a roadblock up ahead. You might as well go around it now. It's like, oh, thank you. You just saved me 6 months, you know, and hundreds of thousands of dollars or whatever. So that's what I find the value of a mastermind, whether it's a personal one, professional one, business one, you know, and even just like a group at the gym. Like, to me, that's kind of my personal fitness mastermind, because we can share things and we hold each other accountable. Because if I don't show up or they don't show up, they're going to hear it.
Yeah, no, I have one Friday at 2:00. I have a mastermind of 5 people that we have been for years have been, you know, providing value for each other. And, you know, this has just happened organically, and we don't miss our Fridays at 2:00. And we're all busy, and we don't miss our Fridays at 2:00 because it's such lifeblood. So yeah, a plug for a posse, man. So where can people find you and find out about your mastermind and all the goodness you're doing?
Yeah. So for the mastermind, you just go to paulmaskill.com/mastermind. Go there, tells you all about it, all the details. There's an application process. We don't just let in anybody. We want to make sure you're a great fit. The higher quality in there, the more results everyone gets. So you fill out the application. It's 1 or 2 minutes. and then we'll set up a time to chat on the phone. We'll chat, answer any questions, provide a little bit more details, and get you on your way so you can finally leverage that. If you're a business owner, leverage that business to, really build a life that you love. And at the end of the day, we've only got one shot at it. So you might as well make it happen and not have as many regrets when it's over.
And the name of the podcast?
The name of the podcast is the Business Owners Freedom Formula Show. So as you mentioned, you're a guest on there. We do it twice a week. We bring on someone that's smarter than me every Monday. And then every Thursday I do a quick tip episode that's real more kind of tactical, actionable advice of, hey, try this. It's working in my business, since I still am running a local business here as well.
Okay, Paul, thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for your insights. And really, thank you for finding me. You really showed me, modeled for me the best way to connect with someone you don't know, like without sales, without anything. You connected me and was in such a personal and compelling way that I couldn't not reciprocate. So I really appreciate your wisdom and your insights, and your coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Mark. Really enjoyed it.
All of Paul's information is going to be in the show notes, so you didn't have to remember or write any of that down, because I'm almost sure you're driving. So just go to the show notes when you get to your office. I thank you for spending your precious time and attention with us. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.